Hey guys, it's Tombox here. Welcome to MST.TV, and in this video, we're gonna crush the Endymion Pendulum matchup. That's right, the stuff that's not even out yet. Oh my god, Tombox, why do you have to ruin it for the rest of us? Why do you have to expose our weakness? Well, you guys are, stuff is to be expected. This will at least make you guys a better player as well, so you can expect their counters that are coming, so that you can counter their counter. Fair enough? And you guys will be playing at a higher skill level of Yu-Gi-Oh, so that you can't just rely on freshness of a deck. Yeah, it seems like I'm ruining the freshness of the deck already. Now, in terms of this video, we're going to be looking at the strengths and weaknesses in terms of tempo and playstyle, and we'll look at counters in the form of, well, floodgates, hand traps, and tech cards that are to be expected. These are some of the natural things that come up right from the get-go as your first thought that comes to mind with countering pendulums. But aside from that, Sky Striker players, I don't think you guys have too much to worry about, to be honest, because your deck is really consistent right now. I get that your current list probably can't deal with Endymion with a spell counter on it, and it's kind of one-sided, kind of a bit of a blowout once you get to that point. But that being said, I still believe that you guys can readapt your list to incorporate some of these techs as a counter towards that boss monster, because when something that basically becomes an auto lose button for you comes up, you guys readapt very quickly. Anyways, let's get into the strengths and weaknesses. This part of the video is brought to you by the Patreons. Huge shoutouts to all my new Patreons out there, and Oliver Desmond for, well, meeting me down in Seattle. Congrats on your Win-A-Mat, and you've seen all the new projects. Of course, the yugioh Pro Skins, I'll be making that a download available very soon. I'm just packaging the last little bit, doing a little bit of tweaking. And of course, you guys have seen the new Field Center, which you guys will be getting, well, basically for free when I see you guys at WCQ. Of course, that's a perk. When I go down there, you guys get free stuff from me, as always, and perhaps even a free mat or two. But that's just random occurrences, guys. But anyways, if you guys want to help support this channel and you want to see more videos like this one, considering being part of the Patreon program. All right, and let's get into this. For the strengths of the deck, this deck establishes control by building one of those break my board type scenarios. You have a lot of monsters, you have a bunch of spell traps and monster negation that you can easily set up on the very first turn, as long as you are not massively interrupted or you're able to play through that type of interruptions from hand traps. Now, monsters themselves have very high damage output, which threatens the clock on your opponent, because if they're not able to stop you or do a dent on your board, then you will easily take an OTK the next turn because of the board set up. And it's actually pretty easy to OTK them because you also have access to Boral Sword and a lot of the meta key damage dealers. Now, on top of that, your pendulum scales are very much a key contributor to your strategy. Unlike a lot of the other pendulum decks where the pendulum scales are mainly there for scale numbers and their searchability and their ability to give you that one pendulum summon, this one's a bit more focused towards actually using the scale effects to spam out monsters, tether it from the deck, the extra deck, or perhaps blowing up your opponent's entire board. And they also fetch out a lot of these massive control type monsters that have high damage output. And another thing is this deck is not extra deck reliant, so a lot of the extra deck kind of lockdown does not hurt you as much as a lot of other people would like to think, or at least compared to the other decks. And consistency wise, you have a lot of search cards, and depending on the variant you're playing, you can even increase that to even further with like Zephyrs or playing Pendulum Magicians. There's a lot more ways that you can get searches, which can give you perhaps 6 or 7 or even 8 search cards in one deck, which gives a lot of consistency. However, for the weaknesses of the deck, you do have predictable tempo. The setup will always require you to have 3 spell counters to kind of kick things off with the Servant of Endymion, and that would lead to your Electromite. In other words, at least for 3 moves, your opponent can predict where you're going to go, and therefore you have a bit of a slow start. And within that start, it is very much interruptible, and if you get interrupted at the very beginning, you're going to struggle quite hard. And this deck does have difficulty recovering without the field spell of Endymion, because you have a hard cost of spell counters, and that spell counter weakness is kind of important because most spell counter removal is a cost, and once you pay out that cost and it gets negated, you don't get those things back. You have to spend more time setting up again. But once you have the field spell, it kind of mitigates that because you can just spend the field spells, spell counters instead. And of course, being a pendulum based deck, you also inherit the weaknesses of pendulums. So we're going to be tackling some of these cards right now. We're going to start off by looking into hand traps. Okay, for hand traps, we're going to start off by looking at the most standard hand trap. We have Ash Blossom. For Ash Blossom, hit the Servant of Endymion's scale effect, which tethers out a monster out of the deck. It special summons out one while summoning out herself as well. She has to be able to summon out herself, and her summons once per turn. However, one ruling note here is that if you do use Ash Blossom on Servant of Endymion and she does not summon herself, her scale effect is not hard once per turn. I don't even think it's once per turn at all. So if she does have the field spell available to use as another cost, she can summon herself again and try to tether out another monster, because only the summon condition is hard once per turn for Servant of Endymion. Next, we have Mythical Beast Master Cerberus. If they activate Master Cerberus on the scale and use Ash Blossom, and that was the first thing that they did, I think it's actually worth it to do it because they've locked in one of their scales at scale 4. I get that it's not a complete big deal, but anything that is 3 or below, they're not going to be able to pendulum summon because they want to pendulum summon their 6s and 7s. So their next scale is probably going to be a scale 8 next to it. And another key note of interaction is that if you have locked themselves in with the Master Cerberus, that's hard once per turn, so they don't have access to the Jackal. And the other thing is with the other scale, if it's like a Servant of Endymion or perhaps something else, the problem is they don't have the other pendulum scale available for them to generate a spell counter. And that does slow them down. It makes them work around a lot harder to get that summon from the scale. Next, we have Spell Power Control, which is the Rhoda for the Endymion cards. I would recommend hitting that, but if you're going to be hitting that, I think I suggest like a different hand trap that can just completely blanket out search effects altogether. It is worth trying. Then there's Terraforming. Terraforming, you're more likely to hit on a Zephyr build. It's still worth it to hit it to prevent your opponent from generating spell counters with the magical Citadel of Endymion. Think about it this way. You're stopping them from getting access to, say, I guess a comparison with a different matchup would be the Salamangreat. If you stop your opponent from searching their field spell, it will cost them a lot more in the long run to actually get their effects off, get the free Relink summon for the Pendulum side here on the Endymion side. It's going to cost them a lot more spell counters to pay for their effects, so anytime they slow down, they just can't ramp up anymore. Then we have Ghost Spell. Ghost Spell is no good in this matchup. You only hit 2 cards. You hit the Destruder or you hit the Darkworm. That is it. But if the format warrants it so that you would main deck this card, those would be your only hit targets. Otherwise, it's a complete side-out card. I would not recommend playing Ghost Spell in this matchup because it's a pendulum-based deck. Everything goes to the extra deck anyway. Next, we have Ghost Ogre, probably one of the best hand traps against this deck because of the fact that the Servant and the Magister, both of these pendulum scale effects require you to summon out your monster, and because of the conjunction, if you don't summon out the monster and this activation gets destroyed or whatever, they won't be able to summon out the other thing that comes with it, whether it be coming from the main deck or coming from the extra deck. They won't be able to do that. So Ghost Ogre's key role here is to aim to reduce the number of spell counters on the field. You can also use it to hit Endymion, because Endymion needs to summon itself out from the scale to get that popping effect, so you can just pop that. You can hit the Mythical Beast Master Cerberus, because, well, they won't be able to search Jackal because it was not destroyed by its own card effect. And then there's, of course, Heavy Metalfoes Electromite. Just removing the arrows is very key in this matchup, and unless they can counter with a Call with the Grave to block your Ghost Ogre, hitting Electromite is always great because you prevent them from drawing and preventing them from cycling a card. And one of the plays that people will start doing if they have an awkward hand is if they have Electromite and they have one of the Servant of Endymion on their side of the field or the Magister, they might use the effect of Endymion, not Endymion, but Electromite to pop the monster so it will put it back onto the scale, which might have given them a free scale to add to their hand. So that's something to be aware of. And if you do use Endymion's effect to bounce back one of your scales, remember, in Electromite's effect to draw a card is that when one of your scales is removed from the field, so they'll get to draw and negate your cards, which is, to be honest, that's kind of ridiculous. I negated your card and I drew a card. Like, heavy minuses right there for the person eating the blood, like the rest of that effect. Then we have Drone Lockbird. You should probably activate it as soon as possible, just so that you lock them out of a turn. So if you use Darkworm, Terraforming, Spell Power Control, I get that it's not the most effective way, but if you lock them out from Drone Lockbird, you can prevent them from generating spell counters, because some of these spell cards, they are searching spells, and with that in mind, they won't be able to do very much unless they already have like a field spell. They have already something that generated the spell counter, like one first spell counter, and they have a scale. Yeah, sure, they'll be able to summon out of the deck. But outside of that, if they're stuck with a terraforming, they have spell power control, they can't even add a card with spell power control. So yeah, those are things that are pretty good. So Drone Lockbird is actually not bad against this matchup. So Impermanence and Veiler. Veiler is not very effective against this deck because the boss monster is a bit too strong, and you can't use Veiler on your own turn. So Impermanence is a little bit better. You should Impermanence the Electromite just so that it can't get the draw effect and it won't put a card into the extra deck. Hit the Jackal King so that it can't negate, so you can kind of chain it all together. And if you're going to be setting Impermanences, set it on the left or the right Farmo zones to match up with your opponent's Pendulum zones, so that if they try to activate, say, Servant, well, you get to stop them. And you can even play the bluffing game against your opponent, where you set two cards. You set one that could possibly not be the Impermanence on the left scale of your side, and then you set your actual Impermanence on the right side. So it's basically fair game. Yeah, negating scale effects is quite important because you can also use that to burn out more spell counters. And then there's Psyframe Gamma. Well, you can use the kill off the Electromite, basically Magister of Endymion's monster effect when it's on the field and it's trying to summon out a dude because it's your very first turn. You can use to stop that, and you can also use to stop the Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon summoning effect. There's just a lot of things. If you know how to use the Gamma, just leave it down in the comment section below. If there's another hand trap that you think I should talk about, just don't mention D Crow, because it's kind of like Ghost Spell, to be honest. Anyways, let's move on to Floodgates. Alright, for Floodgates, there can be only one. The timing of this should be when there's only one spellcaster on the field, probably the most ideal. It's kind of odd because there are outs against this. If they have like dragon, zombie spellcasters like Ash Blossom, they have Destrudo, they can technically go into a Nightmare Phoenix and try and pop it, so that will be the out. So I kind of set it up so all the top is the timing, all the bottom would be all their outs for it, just so that it's not like exactly a one-sided thing. Anti-spell fragments, the anti-pendulum, they just activate as soon as possible. Why would you even give them a chance to put one scale up? If they put that one scale up and that one scale is Endymion, your board can potentially also just be completely wrecked. So what would they side? They would side Pankratops to deal with the anti-spell fragments. They might side Twin Twisters, Mystical Space Typhoon, and of course they still have access to the Nightmare Phoenix. I think the Nightmare Phoenix though will be a little bit harder to kind of get off, just simply because, well, they need to be able to summon two monsters, and it's not as easy as it sounds without spells. Then there's Skill Drain. Now, keynote about Skill Drain is that if your monster on the field can hold spell counters, or if your card can hold spell counters, I guess in Skill Drain's case, a monster, if you're holding like, say, 20 spell counters and you get Skill Drain, you go back down to 0. Although you are still considered as a monster that can hold spell counters, so if Endymion ever gets summoned, it will still count you for the pop. As for their outs, of course they have any sort of spell trap removal that they can add in, like Mystical Space Typhoon. It's becoming to, well, that card's picking up in popularity for sure. And of course there's still Endymion, because Endymion pops when it summons itself out of the scale. It's popping cards as part of the spell effect of the card. Then there's Summon Limit. Just use it at any time, really. Just use it whenever you're comfortable with using it. The only problem is Boss Endymion, and if you defeat Boss Endymion that has skills spell counters on it, well, the problem is it can search out a normal spell, which may or may not out you. I'm not sure if they're gonna be like, oh, I'm just gonna go ahead and get myself, I don't know, like a remove trap or something silly like that. Also, Pankratops can take out Summon Limit as well, but it does require them to trade, and sometimes you'll have a counter for that. Rivalry of Warlords is a bit of an interesting one. It's because if you lock your opponent out of a spellcaster gig, if you lock them into dragons, just be careful that they might Black Rose you, and that just sucks. And if you lock them into spellcasters, first of all, they're not hurt at all, And second of all, they can go into Arcanite Magician, and Arcanite Magician is basically another Black Rose in this deck because Arcanite can remove spell counters from anywhere on my side of the field. However, this rivalry thing is pretty good against the Zephyr build because now they're going to have worms on the field, and that isn't something that they can deal with quite easily. So yeah, there's that. As for Gozen match, you can maximize your timing on this one. If the Servant activates, then you can activate Gozen. Note that they have to summon out a monster with 1000 attack or more that can hold a spell counter, but the problem is Servant is the only one that's wind, so they just don't get to summon anything else, and they'll be locked in wind. But yeah, that's kind of a bit of a lockout. But I think the best one here would probably be there can be only one. It's pretty decent, even though they have the Phoenix. Anti-spell obviously is a given, and the summon limit is probably the most restrictive out of all of them. And we're on to the techs. So I kind of columned them out with like spell trap removal, anti-pendulum going first, going second, and I guess a bit of mirror match because that's to be expected. For spells and trap removal, Cosmic Cyclone is a pretty solid choice in any type of pendulum based match because once you banish the card, it's over. There's no way of coming back from stuff getting banished. If they put like a Jackal on the scale and you just banish that, oh, that just sucks. And you can do it when they activate their scale effect, which is hard once per turn. Not only did they just get their Jackal banished, but they also lost the summon as well. So yeah, there's lots of benefits for using Cosmic Cyclone. Twin Twister's obviously good, MST's pretty good, and if you're gonna be a time-winning dude, on the most frowned upon way of winning, you can use Spell Shattering Arrow, which is pretty decent if you're not playing pendulums yourself. Remember, tempo control is key to defeating the Endymion deck. So if they're trying to set up and you're crippling their setup every step of the way, it's gonna be a no-brainer. You can even like deal with their field spell pretty early, like MST their field spell when they activate it, just so that they can't accumulate those spell counters. It's quite important because once it gets one spell counter, you're gonna have a very tough time. And Cosmic Cyclone can remove that card from play, which is, I think, pretty important to get that trade off. Next, there's Anti-Pendulum. So you have Anti-Spell Fragments, as mentioned before, but you also have the option of Dimensional Barrier. If the deck really takes off, Dimensional Barrier will kill this deck. It's a turn skip. It's like maxing someone, except that this time they just don't have the option to do anything. You force them into a turn end all phase. And then we have Going First. Going First as a special summon based deck, I recommend using Vanity's Fiend. Vanity's Fiend locking people out is very good. With a big body like that, they can't really run it over without special summoning something. And since Vanity's Fiend covers that ground, you're fine. A very funny tech you can try just to slow them down. This is absolutely niche, and if you use it, you're too good. You're just too good at this game. You use Spell Exhaustion. All it does is remove all the spell counters on the field. So they have to reset. It's pretty painful. One random guy had it sided in on yugioh Pro, and I actually lost. Very awkwardly. I'm like, oh, I got all these spell counters available on my Endymion, my field spell. I've got everything ready, and then all of a sudden, he just wipes my board of everything, and then I die. The Solemn package is also very strong because the Pendulum summon, you can just nuke it. Everything dies. It's pretty good. As for going second, Winged Dragon Raw Sphere mode. The deck establishes some boards which has 3 to 4 negates, and because of that, even if it's just 2 negates, it would still carry an Electromite in there, and that would carry 2 other monsters, and therefore, Sphere mode, just sunny side up, it's over. Kaijus, kind of good, kind of bad, but if you're able to put the bigger kaiju on your side, you can use it to kind of punch. A mono Iwado plus an attack board wipe is probably pretty good. A mono Iwado is pretty solid. Why do you need an attack based one? It's because if they have a spell countered monster, which is the Endymion, you're not going to be able to destroy it with a spell card anymore. Then there's Pancratops. Pancratops is like, oh, the stats are just slightly too low to deal with the big boss, but you can still use Pancratops to take care of the Jackal. The Jackal is preventing you from using your monster effects, so you just punch it dead, and then you use Pancratops to pop something else, just not the big boss monster, because it's not possible. Not targetable, not destroyable. Then, other choices you might have, as long as you have something to bait out the first or second negation, Book of Eclipse is pretty good, or you can use Book of Eclipse to bait something, just let something else goes off. Evenly match, kind of the same deal. And then another key weakness is that if you're trying to push for an OTK, you can go with monsters with 3k or technically 2850 attack or more. Like Boral Sword, you can use it to kill the Jackals and then kill the Endymion, and at that point they might as well just been OTK'd. But yeah, I think the deck kind of struggles with big beefy monsters if they don't run the Master Cerberus. But that's just my opinion. A lot of people are going to shove in different kinds of text to deal with it, but this is kind of more of like a basic insight into the deck. So looking at the mirror match, Wavering Eyes is a given, Ignister is a given, and if you're going to be playing Reaper, you can Reaper their Electromite, yeah, or their Boral Sword. I think Boral Sword's a better target, but Electromite stops them from setting up. Yeah. So that would be it for my how to crush Endymion guide for you guys. This might be an early look at it. It will change. I will probably do an update kind of like the other ultimate counter guides. But if I'm missing anything, leave it down in the comment section below about how you would take care of Endymion, especially for you Skystrike players. I want to hear about how you guys are going to take care of this issue, because the biggest problem would be the spell countered version of Endymion, the Founding Sorcerer Supreme. So how do you guys deal with it? Are you gonna kaiju it? Let me know down in the description below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, hit me up with a thumbs up. If you want to see more stuff from MST.TV, smash the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and then, well, that's all I got for this video, guys. So I will see you then in the next one. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please drop us a like so we know we are doing a good job, and you can also subscribe to MST.TV for more fantastic videos by clicking on the button on the left. Don't forget to check out our partners at Imperium Duelist. They make really high quality mats, including some of my own limited edition release stuff. And if you want to check out one of our past videos, click here on the right. As always, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV, and I'll see you next time.